and you will ascertain if the defendants are present.
May it please your honor, the defendants Otto Rausch and Edward Strout are absent.
Days ago, Otto Rausch and Edward Strout have been arraigned separately because on the opening day they were too ill to respond. So that the record will show that they now have been arraigned properly and in accordance with law. We are now ready to hear the presentation by the prosecution.
This was the tragic fulfillment of a program of intolerance and arrogance. Vengeance is not our goal, nor do we seek merely a just retribution. We ask this court to affirm by international penal action man's right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of his race or creed. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. We shall establish, beyond the realm of doubt, facts which, before the dark decade of the Third Reich, would have seemed incredible. Courts will show that the slaughter committed by these defendants was dictated not by military necessity, but by that supreme perversion of thought, the Nazi theory of the master race. We shall show that these deeds of men in uniform were the methodical execution of long-range plans to destroy ethnic, national, political, and religious groups which stood condemned in the Nazi mind. Genocide, the extermination of whole categories of human beings, was a foremost instrument of the Nazi doctrine of man. Mr. Glancy will now read part one of the opening statement.
Let me suggest that as each attorney appears at the podium, he announce his name and whom he represents. Of course, that will not be necessary with the prosecution, but I would like the defense counsel to know that. We didn't seem to do that last time, and that somewhat makes the record ambiguous. Very well.
Highest-ranking leader of a Gruppe down to the lowest SS man. On 22 June 1941, with no previous warning, Germany invaded Soviet Russia. The Einsatzgruppen, already alerted, fell in behind the marching columns of the Wehrmacht as an integral part of the machine constructed for swift and total war. Within a space of 3 days, the training grounds in Saxony were empty, and all Einsatzgruppen had entered upon the performance of their various missions. The tribunal will recall how rapidly the Wehrmacht overran vast territory in the early months of this aggression. All these thousands of men, women, and children killed had first to be selected, brought together, held in restraint, and transported to a place of death. This was accomplished by special orders to report and by manhunts. It was followed by concentration of the victims under guard to be transported to a place for execution or at the abattoir itself. That it already contained about 1,000 people. I looked for the man who did the shooting. He was an SS man who sat at the edge of the narrow end of the pit, his feet dangling into the pit. He had a Tommy gun on his knees and was smoking a cigarette. The people, completely naked, went down some steps which were cut in the clay wall of the pit and clambered over the heads of the people lying there to the place which the SS man directed them. They lay down in front of the dead or injured people. Some caressed those who were still alive, and spoke to them in a low voice. Then I heard a series of shots. I looked into the pit and saw that the bodies were twitching, or the heads lying already motionless on top of the bodies that lay before them. Blood was running from their necks. I was surprised that I was not ordered away, but I saw that there were 2 or 3 postmen in uniform nearby. The next batch was approaching already. They went down into the pit, lined themselves up against the previous victims, and were shot. When I walked back round the mound, I noticed another truckload of people which had just arrived. This time, it included sick and infirm persons. An old, very thin woman with terribly thin legs was undressed by others who were already naked, while 2 people held her up. The woman appeared to be paralyzed. The naked people carried the woman around the mound. I left with Minikes and drove in my car back to Dubno. On the morning of the next day, when I again visited the site, I saw about 30 naked people lying near the pit, about 30 to 50 meters away from it. Some of them were still alive. They looked straight in front of them with a fixed stare and seemed to notice neither the chilliness of the morning nor the workers of my firm who stood around. A girl of about 20 spoke to me and asked me to give her clothes and help her escape. At that moment, we heard a fast car approach, and I noticed that it was an SS detail. I moved away to my site. 10 minutes later, we heard shots from the vicinity of the pit. The Jews, still alive, had been ordered to throw the corpses into the pit. Then they had themselves to lie down in this and be shot in the neck. Another form of extermination employed was asphyxiation by lethal gases in enclosed trucks or vans. Here again, the victims were induced to enter these death machines by the promise that they would be transported to other areas for resettlement. As the van left the loading area, it was filled with deadly fumes. A few minutes later, when the van reached the disposal point, the corpses were unloaded into prepared excavations which became unmarked mass graves. These, then, were the usual methods used by the Einsatzgruppen. May I now briefly detail some of their activities. Einsatzgruppe A made a comprehensive report in October 1941 describing what it had been doing. The report gave the total of 121,817 persons killed. The commanding officer stated, "To our surprise, it was not easy at first to set in motion an extensive pogrom against the Jews of about 60 houses. During the following nights, approximately 2,300 Jews were made harmless in a similar way. Sonderkommando 1A, which was under the command of the defendant Sandberger, arrested all male Jews over 16 in its area, and with the exception of doctors and the Council of Elders, they were all executed. The defendant Strauch commanded Einsatzkommando 2. 6 months after they began operations, they reported a total of 33,970 executions. The Commissioner General of White Ruthenia had the following to say. During detailed consultations with the SS Brigadeführer Zenner and the extremely capable chief of the SD, SS Obersturmbannführer Dr. Juris Strauch, we found that we had liquidated approximately 55,000 Jews in White Ruthenia during the last 10 weeks. In the Minsk land area, the jury was completely exterminated without endangering the allocation of labor in any way. The defendant Yost was in command of Einsatzgruppen A on 27 March 1942 when they reported that 15,000 Jews were shot in Sherwin. The report pointed out that these acts created a feeling of insecurity